In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. So it was several years ago when I undertook my first Scrum project in a church setting. The idea behind it, as the Scrum Master, as you might call them, although it's kind of a strange name for what we do, was actually meant to be a facilitator and to help the team figure out what project it was going to do, how they were going to do it, and who was going to do what. And I can tell you that I was terrified. Trying to give up control like that, although I more had the illusion of control, was just one of those at times when my anxiety started spiking. After all, I'm a pretty smart person. You could say, what if they forget this? What if this doesn't happen? So on and so forth. But as it turned out, what we ended up gaining from this was so much more. I saw teamwork like I'd never seen before, and seen fellowship, and we managed to get quite a bit done around the church that had just been languishing and being forgotten. And I share this morning because in the gospel we have some similar dynamics, don't we? We have in the gospel King Herod being faced with this wonderful news that would have required him to give up control. We actually had two different responses to Christ, two different responses to the goodness that had come into the world. Now, both required sacrifice, both required something to gain. But between Herod and the wise men, or the Magi, they responded very, very differently. The case for the wise men was they saw the star in the east, and that's where they lived, and they were actually Zoroastrian clergy. And so they saw this star rising. They had been able to discern that there was a new king who was born in the midst of the Judean people, and so they made a long journey. And when they got there and they gave him these gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh, after a long search, first a detour in Jerusalem, because they thought, well, if a new king was born, he was probably born to the present king. He goes in, starts asking Herod, and it says Herod was afraid. But when they eventually found the Christ child, they were overcome with joy. See, they were willing to give up, I don't know how many weeks and months it would have taken them to go through this journey. They were able to be open-minded enough to see what God was doing in their midst, see what God was doing amongst the people that may not have fit with the religion that they practiced. But when they discovered Christ, the child of goodness, laying before them, they were overwhelmed with joy. We also know that it took them quite a while, so this was quite a commitment to get there. Many times when you see a church pageant on Christmas Eve or in many creche scenes, you see the Magi right there all ready with the Christ child in the manger. But when you read the Gospels, it actually tells us something a bit different. So when you read the Gospels, it says that they came to the house where Mary and Joseph and Jesus were staying. So it just leads us to understand that they had been there a while and Mary and Joseph had gotten themselves established. So they didn't spend all their time in the manger. Eventually they found a house and were residing there. Herod, on the other hand, had a different response to the goodness that was amongst him. The birth of the Christ child was announced. And here's the thing, is he certainly knew the prophecies, didn't he? Or he had people that could look up and tell him what the prophecies were. So he went to find them and he said, so tell me where the Messiah is going to be born. And the piece of information that they came back with was born in Bethlehem of Judea. And they quoted that. Now you notice he didn't go on to understand everything that the Messiah was to bring about. Peace on earth, transformed creation, the lion and the lamb lying down together. All those wonderful things. No, all Herod was able to see was a threat to his power, which was really so sad that he wanted to destroy not just Jesus, but all those around him just for good measure, just to make sure he didn't miss anyone. I always have to bring this up every year because in the church year we celebrate I wouldn't say we celebrate, but we remember the slaughter of the holy innocents. And it always usually falls on December the 28th. But many years, when a Sunday comes in, it gets pushed one day further onto December 29th, which is also my birthday. So every year I have to look up and say, okay, he missed me again. I survived. But I think the sad part, actually there's many sad parts about how Herod responded, was that he didn't just want to destroy goodness, or he didn't just want to destroy children, but goodness itself, the kind of goodness that's transformative, the kind of goodness that calls us into ways of being that are beyond what we can ask for or imagine, that actually raises up our very beings into something completely new. He was okay with goodness as long as it benefited him, as long as there was order and stability and King Herod could stay in power. But anything that was disruptive, anything that suggested, you must forgive people 70 times 7, or if it suggested, you must pray for your enemies, you forgive them and pray for those who persecute you. The kind of goodness that asks for people to be generous and loving and caring, and to set aside their own egos for something even greater. Herod didn't like any of that, and so he rejected it. Hatched his plan, was thwarted in his plan, and did some truly terrible things. And I think all of us, when we encounter the gospel, have a kind of choice to make. We have the same choice as to whether it be like the wise men who will embrace the Christ child and the goodness and everything that comes along with it, even everything it demands, or take an attitude like Herod did that says, well, no, we don't want that. I don't want that. And we may not be destroying in the same way that he did, but perhaps it's something that when we see the goodness and the demands of the gospel, can ignore it, or just say, that's just not practical. I can't do it. Or perhaps it's just too hard. All those choices are before us. But when we embrace Jesus Christ and all that he represents, when we take the same place as the wise men, and we will experience joy because the goodness that Christ is there to permeate all of creation and to transform all of creation. And we may not see it all at once, even in our personal lives. It's something that you have to work out over a lifetime. And it will still be difficult. The kind of things that Jesus calls us to do and to be is not easy. But while it is difficult, it is very, very worth it. Because seeing the goodness of God gives us direction, gives us purpose. Because what we desire is the ultimate good. Deep down inside, we desire what is ultimately good. And Jesus is that perfect goodness that's come amongst us and is part of this world and permeates this world. And so it's up to us to be like the wise men, to search for him, to find him, and to embrace him. Thanks be to God.